Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and I want to welcome you to the video on how to install the MySQL tools on a Mac, in particular a Mac OS X 10.10. And I must apologize for the delay in the video. It was really held up by the fact that the most recent downloads on the MySQL site didn't work with OS X 10.10. I don't know if they worked with an earlier version, but they don't work with 10.10. So I worked with the SOAS tech office throughout the week to try to get that resolved. And we did a lot of interesting things, but we didn't get it resolved. And then I really remembered to go back to the tried and true, which is I looked at our textbook, the Marac MySQL second edition, and I looked at Appendix B, which has the instructions for the installation. And there are details there about the versions that they used when they tested the book. And I just went to the archive area for the downloads, and I downloaded the versions that they used when they tested the book. And you know what? They worked. So that's a thing to remember when you can't get things to work. So here we go. I'm going to be working from the textbook, and Appendix B, the first page is just sort of a table of contents. The second page is sort of a fairly good explanation of what we're going to do, how to install the software from MySQL.com, and then the first part of it, how to install the MySQL community server. And now the detailed instructions start on page 569. And if you look at the top there, we have the URL for downloading MySQL community server. So I'm just going to go there. So let me open a browser. Okay, found the cursor. So open a browser. And I want to mention I'm using a virtual machine here. It's got a brand new copy of OS X 10.10. It's actually a Mac virtual machine that's running on VMware Fusion on Mac OS X 10.10, but it gives me an opportunity to have a clean install, so I know that what I'm seeing is probably what you're going to see. Okay, so that's what we're doing. So we've opened up Safari, and let's type in the URL, HTTP, then it's lowercase dev dot mysql dot com slash downloads slash MySQL slash. And it takes us to the page. And because we're on a Mac, it shows us Mac stuff. So if we go all the way down, you'll see that there's a lot of things available for Mac. And what it's showing us is the current release, 5.6.26. And that's the one I had very bad experience with. So if you look higher up the page in the right-hand column, looking for previous GA versions, and it says archived versions. Okay. So I click on that, and the first thing on the page is community server. I click on that, and I'm looking on page 569, and I can see from an example that looks like they probably use version 5.6.22. They don't say that explicitly, but they use that as an example. So I'm going to go 5.6.22, okay? And then the version that I want is the easily installed version for the Mac, which is the DMG file. So it's not the first file, but the second one. And I'm just going to download that. And that's going to take a little while. And while that's downloading, I'm going to pause the video so that you guys don't have to watch the whole download. So we'll be back in a few minutes. And we're back. We're just getting to the very end of the download. And there it is. So I'm going to click on the downloads icon. And the most immediate file above is the install.dmg file. I'll double click on that. And we see a dialog box open up. And it's doing some work and setting things up. So now it's showing me a Finder window with an installer package. So I'm just going to double click on the installer package. And I get an install dialog from MySQL. Looks good. Click on Continue. Click on Continue here with the license. It gives me an Agree button. I click it. Then I have an Install button down in the lower right. I click on that. And it prepares the installation. And it wants the password. This is the password of my Mac. Okay? It's not any password related to the database. So I type in my Mac virtual machine password and ask it to install, and here it is, installing. That's a good sign. Very good sign. Okay. So I'm going to close that. And how do I know if it's running? Okay. Well, on the Mac, there's a nice feature. You can go up to your toolbar and click on the Apple icon on the far left side. And then choose System Preferences. That's the second choice. And way down at the bottom of System Preferences, we now have a MySQL icon. So let's give that a single click. And it's going to open up a dialog that shows us MySQL server status, and it's stopped. Well, geez, we would like it to be started. I'd also like it to automatically start every time I'll start it, but I don't think it works in this version. Let's see. Oh, well, it worked. I clicked on it, and it wants to know my password for my machine again. So let me try to do that. No, it says it could not change the automatic startup configuration. That seems to be broken in this version. That seems to be working in the later version, but of course it can't really start the server. So we're going to have to start this each time we come in by coming to this same System Preferences MySQL to get to the MySQL server status. And I'm going to click on the button that says Start. Yeah, there it is. So now it's running. So I should be able to connect to it when I install the Workbench, which is the client application. Again, this is a client server application. So we have the database server, which we just installed, MySQL Community Server. And then we have the client, which we're going to install in a couple of minutes. And they both are going to run on our own computer, in this case on my laptop, in your case on whatever machine you're using. And so we're going to have the client and the server on the same machine. So that's going to give us our own private development and testing environment. It's a little too cozy to be a reasonable production environment. In a production environment, we typically would have the server on maybe a Linux server at our ISP, someplace like that. Okay. Okay, so let's close this dialog. Looks good. And let's go and look for the page to download Workbench. So those instructions start on page 570, and they really get into detail on page 571. And at the top of 571, we see the URL for downloading Workbench, and it's in that same download subdirectory, but the final subdirectory is Workbench. So we're just going to, we're in archives right now, so we're in the complete wrong place. So what do? Well, we can back up. Let's do some backing up. Okay, so now we're back to downloads. Nope. Easier to do the typing. So downloads Workbench. Looks good. Okay. And you know what? I'm going to the wrong place anyway, because remember, we want to get the archived version. And so let me tell you how we got to the archived version. Okay. So let's look at this again. So we're at http://dev.mysql.com /downloads /MySQL. That's where we went to get it the last time. And it was that place, if you remember, right in the middle of the page on the right, we could get to archived versions. That's archived versions of all the programs. Okay? So we want to find an archived version of Workbench. We had already gone to MySQL Community Server. MySQL Workbench is this fourth link. We go there. And which version do we want? Well, if you look at the page where they're doing the downloading, you will see what version they tested this with. And I'm still trying to find it. Oh, here it is. It's on page 570 in this How to Install MySQL Workbench. They say that they tested it against 6.2.4. So that's the version that we want. So instead of 6.3.3, we want 6.2.4. We want it for Mac OS X. It's going to give us a DMG file. That's what we like to install. Makes it easy. Click on download. And we're going to pause it again while the download's going on. And here we are. We've just come to the end of the download. So I'm going to click on the downloads. And there's my DMG file right up on just above the downloads icon. And I'm going to double click on that and get similar behavior to what I saw from the community server download. Okay, and what we do with this is that we take the dolphin icon, which is the icon for Workbench, and we drag it over into this box that represents the applications folder. And that kicks off a process which copies the files into the applications folder. Now, if you go down and look in the applications folder, a little farther down, it's alphabetical based on my installation. We see the icon for MySQL Workbench. So that's what we want. We're going to give it a double click. And say, okay, yeah, we want it to open. So now it's going to open. I'm going to shrink the Finder Okay? I'm going to do one other thing before I really start to work. I find it a lot easier where I have an icon in the dock for each application that I use a lot. And here I'm going to be using this Workbench a lot. So let's go down, hover over the Workbench icon, right click, and then say Options, Keep in Dock. Okay? So now we're not going to have to go hunting for that in the Applications folder. Now, one of the nice things about the install here is that it was able to set up a connection. So if you look on page 571, there's information on how to configure a connection if we don't already have one. But we do already have one, so that's great. And so now we're going to double click on that, and it's going to open. And that looks good. We have a place, we have a query editor. We're going to be learning on how to use those. And it seems to be connected to the database. Now, it's not obvious to you because you haven't spent a week, or perhaps you have. Maybe you haven't spent a week trying to get the newer version to start. But if we really want to know if it's started, we can go to server status. That's over here in this left pane management. Okay, so server status, we can click on that. And we see, yeah, we're on port 3306. The server is running. It seems to have a low load. It's got 4 connections. I can't explain why, but it has 4 connections, and that's the right thing. And there we are. That's just what we need. Now, how could we use the product here to start up and shut down? Well, we can go down in the second grouping in the left panel, Startup Shutdown. We go there, and we see the server is running. And what if we wanted to stop it? Let's click Stop. Okay. So it's always good to do these demos without a practice. Well, that doesn't work here. Okay, so if we want to start and stop it, I will remind you we've got to go do this. We've got to go up to the toolbar for the whole machine. Go to the left side, click the Apple, go to System Preferences. Okay. Scroll down to MySQL. One click. Then we get this MySQL Server Status panel. Okay, now we can click on Stop MySQL Server. And to do that, it's going to need the machine password, because we've assigned no password to the database. Okay? So it seems to be stopped here. Let's click on the other one. Let's go back to server status. Okay, and it still thinks it's running. Isn't that nice? Alrighty. Server status. Real impressive, huh? Let's go to startup shutdown. Back to server status. So let's try to click on that connection again. I went back to home. Yeah. So when I tried to connect to it again, it sees that it's stopped. So let me go find that dialog again. System Preferences. Start MySQL Server. Seems to be started here. Okay. And then let's see where we are here. Let's go back to the home. That's its little house. Sorry, I had to hit the cough button there. And let's see. It looks now that we actually have to start yet another connection. I don't seem to be able to delete the connections right now. I don't know why. We'll figure out that a little later in the semester. Remember, this is a free product, so beggars can't be choosers, I guess. But to go to the home part of the Workbench, we click on the little house. And then if we double click again, we'll see that we are connected. And we, in fact, if we go to server status for that, we see that's actually running. Okay, and then go back to query 1. Okay, now we've got 3 connection tabs up here. And sooner or later during the semester, I'm going to find a way to be able to close those. Oh, close tab. Oh, there we go. Right click on it, close tab. Okay, so the ones we're not using, I was able to close. I did it right away. So, now, do we have any data right now? Well, right now we just have test data that was installed with the system. Let's look at that. Go down under schemas in the left panel, the last part. Highlight test. And click on the little triangle to the left. And it shows us there are tables. Okay. And double click on tables. And that's not too impressive. We didn't get any tables. Well, we're going to add some data right now anyway. Okay, so now for the last part of the install. And this is going to follow the instructions that are in the Merock book starting on page 572, how to install the software from Merock.com. Okay? And starting on 573, they tell us where to go to get our stuff. Okay, it says go to www.merock.com. So let's minimize Workbench, and let's close the control panel, and let's go back to Safari and just go to www.merock.com. That's our publisher of the textbook. And we want to find our book, which is, if we click on the link for shop books, it's under database programming books. So we'll click that. And we'll see it's the 3rd image, Merock's MySQL, a 2nd edition. So we'll click on that image. And I hope you've already bought it. If you haven't bought it, here's a chance to buy it. I'm using the electronic version on my iPad with some success this year. So I'm happy with that. I wasn't really happy with the electronic version last time, but somehow I think I'm just happier with electronic versions altogether now. Okay, and that in the instructions in the book, it tells us to find the software. Where does it say how to do it? I said click on the downloads tab. So click on the downloads tab, free downloads. There's this whole bunch of gray tabs I have. So the 3rd one's free downloads. And then I want to scroll up. There are a couple of sample chapters. Those are there for potential instructors or potential purchasers who are not associated with the class. And we want the second of these two. The first one is an executable zip for Windows, and the second one is for all other platforms. So we're going to click on Download Now. And you would think that we would download, but no, we don't. Like every other for-profit enterprise, they want to know who we are first. So I've done this about 1 billion times, but I'm going to put in my name and my email. And I don't mind giving them my address because I like these guys. They've been pretty kind to us and very supportive. And I always want to know what's happening with their books anyway. So I say, sure, tell me about the books. Now, the thing that they did with the CAPTCHA to check that we're not a robot is pretty cool. You click on the I'm not a robot checkbox. And then it tells you select all images with mountains. In my case, it's a little different every time. So I click on that one. That's a mountain. I click on this one. This is a mountain. I think those are the only obvious mountains. And then we verify. And it says green check mark, I'm not a robot, which is pretty cool. Then we click on register. And then unfortunately, we have to navigate back to the downloads again. And this time we really do get to download. Now I can tell from all the binging and bonging, which you may have heard, that I did get a confirmation email from them, but I don't need that in order to do the download. So click continue to download. And now I go back to the same place. So I'm back to the books page. I click on free downloads. And I go down to the bottom. I click on zip file for any system. And now it really does download. So I click, and you can see that downloaded pretty quickly. All right. And I'm going to shrink the browser so I can open up the Finder. And I'm going to put these files under documents. It's a little unclear where in the directory system you want to put them, but that's an easy place to find. So I'm going to put it under documents, which is empty right now. And the bottom level directory that they want us to use according to the instructions on page 573 is called Maroc. So we're just going to say we want a new folder. Change the name to Maroc. Okay. And then to get the right hierarchy, we want to go down to this downloads icon. And if you're downloading options are the default ones, then your download has already been unzipped. If not, you just have to double click and it'll unzip. And you'll end up with MySQL. We're going to pull it into Maroc. Sorry, I had to go for the cough button again. Didn't quite get to it. Okay, so let's look at the directory structure. Maroc, MySQL. Then we've got a bunch of different things we're going to use for different purposes. The purpose we're going to do now, we're going to set up the databases that go along with the books, and we're going to do DB setup. Okay, so here's that. So how do we do that? Well, just take a look at 573 before we leave it. You'll see the directories that are that we have here and what's in them. That's a help. And also that there are three databases, three schemas that we're going to work with. They are AP, accounts payable, OM, order management, and EX, examples. Okay, so we've got three there. So we have to find a way to load them. So go on over to page 574. They give us an idea about how to do it. And if you go to 575, they start to give us the play-by-play. And here's what we do, okay? We're going to, just to show you where the file is that we're going to use, if you double-click on DB Setup now, you'll see that there is a create databases SQL file, .SQL file. And that's the one that we're going to use, okay? So we're going to have to use that from the Workbench. So you follow the instructions. We go to the Workbench. We have a connection, okay? So what do we need now? Well, we need to open an SQL script file. How do we do that? Well, there's a toolbar for this connection, and the second icon has a folder opening, and SQL, open an SQL script file in the new query tab. So let's open that. And it brings us to Meroc, double click, MySQL, double click, DB setup, double click, create databases.sql, highlight, and you probably could double click, but I like to highlight and click open. And what you'll see in the editor window that we have here is we have a pretty big script. If you scroll, you'll see it's darn big. And the reason it's so big is that we are inserting all the data into the database. Now, this is great to do for a textbook or some kind of test database. It's not what we typically do for production databases, but so this is just a script that will load the databases. We're going to use this at the very beginning, and also there's a note in the book, and I'll remind you in class and throughout the semester, if you need to go back to a fresh copy of the databases, you can go here again and run this again. So it will not only set them up the first time, it will delete them and create a fresh copy of them again. So if you somehow done some of the exercises and you don't like the results you have and you want to try again, you can reset the state to the fresh state by rerunning this. So we're going to run this, and there are two icons. There's a toolbar for this query, okay, and the third icon is a lightning bolt. And that's the one we're going to use. That is going to execute. It will either execute the selected portion of the script, but we haven't highlighted anything. So it's going to execute the whole script. The one to the right with the I-beam, it will execute only the command that your cursor is on. The I-beam is to represent the cursor. So we want to come back to the plain old lightning bolt and give it a click. And down here, there is an action output window. And we're just going to scroll through it, and we can see that we got a couple of warning signs. The warning signs come from a command that says to delete or drop the database and or the table if it already exists. Well, it doesn't already exist, so we see a warning on that. But when we come back to run this again to reset the databases, we would probably get a green. Okay, so that ran fine, and we have everything we need. Let's just acquaint ourselves with a couple of more features. You may have noticed earlier that I was looking for data to show you. And I was looking over in this panel on the left, and the fourth category is schemas. So every database has an associated schema to control its structure and content. And we only see one for tests now. The reason we don't see the ones we just added is we need to refresh the view. So slide to the right, and there's this twirly arrow, double arrow icon that's for refresh. So click refresh. And now we see our old friends AP, EX, OM, and test. And they have been added. So let's go to right next to AP. Let's left click on AP. And now we see a lot of things: tables, views, stored procedures, functions. We're going to open tables. Okay, and we see the tables there. And I happen to know that the invoices table already has some data in it. So I'm going to click on that little triangle next to invoices. Okay. And we see we can look at the columns, indexes, all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to highlight the invoices and right click, and I'm going to say select rows limit 1000. And it's going to open that table in the editor. So this is actually the data that's in that table. I'm scrolling down through it. So that table has 114 rows in it. Okay, so this is proof that we've actually accomplished what we set out to do. We're going to learn a lot about this tool, both the server and the client, in the coming weeks. And I invite you, if you want to read ahead and try things ahead. If you get ahead of me, well, then I'll just have to catch up. But it's a lot of fun, and I want you to have some fun with it. So I'm going to say goodbye now until I see you in class. Bye-bye.